The snaky hips, the iconic lips, and a voice like no other singer. Mick Jagger is an instantly recognizable rock star, but only the biggest Rolling Stones fans know these things about him.
You're just gonna do what I do, that's what I do.
Yeah, all right, well, just do it.
All right, then. Well, that's done and dusted then, isn't it? By the way, you look great.
Jagger comes from far more humble beginnings than many of today's rock stars. His father, Basil Jagger, was a phys ed teacher, while his mother, Ava, was also a teacher. He was born in 1943 in the middle of World War II, making that Crossfire Hurricane line from Jumpin' Jack Flash a reference to the Luftwaffe bombers that were strafing England at the time. Of course, this was a time when families didn't have phones or televisions and needed to make their own entertainment. Members of the Jagger family would take turns dancing, playing instruments, or, in his case, doing impressions and song and dance routines. By the time he was 14, he was regularly sneaking out of the house to hang out with local bands. Jagger told the Irish Independent, "It was like fun. I could see I got a good reaction." It all took off from there, but according to Jagger, his parents weren't exactly happy when he told them he was giving up his spot at the London School of Economics for a career in music. Much later, however, he would also credit his parents with giving him a centered upbringing that kept him from descending fully into the self-destructive behavior that takes the lives of so many musicians. He told the Talks, "When you are young and you have a sort of close family life and stuff, it helps you to be centered for later." It's easy to think that someone who lives in the spotlight must be well adapted to public attention, but according to Rolling Stone, Jagger is actually pretty strict about holding on to what little privacy he has managed to maintain. He hates being interviewed, for example, especially when the subject touches on anything but music. And when he does sit down with a journalist, interviews only usually last for about 20 minutes. When the Irish Independent reached out to him ahead of the Stones' 2018 show in Dublin, they asked him why he didn't make appearances on talk shows. He simply countered, "Why do things you don't need to?" But there's more to it than that, and Jagger seems cautious of just how important he is to many people. He explained, "People have this obsession. They want you to be like you were in 1969. They want you to because otherwise their youth goes with you, you know. It's very selfish, but it's understandable."
This image thing is just a thing of media. People have many, many facets of personality, and that includes me.
Jagger hasn't even released a memoir. When asked about writing one, Jagger said, "You don't want to end up like some old footballer in a pub talking about how he made the cross in the Cup final in 1964. It was once the goal of any aspiring British musician to get big in America. Hopping across the pond and scoring a hit in the American charts was a marker for success for practically every group worth their salt. This was also true for Mick Jagger and the Stones, but once he got there, he wasn't impressed by what he found. When the Stones went on tour in 1964, they hit some of America's biggest cities. Jagger told Rolling Stone that New York City was wonderful and Los Angeles, quote, "was also kind of interesting," but he had less kind things to say about the rest of the country. Jagger explained, "Outside of that, we found it the most repressive society, very prejudiced in every way. There was still segregation, and the attitudes were fantastically old-fashioned. Americans shocked me by their behavior and their narrow-mindedness." When the Irish Independent asked Jagger just what he was thinking when he wrote Brown Sugar, the answer wasn't one you would have expected. Jagger simply said, "I really don't know, and I was in Australia when I wrote it, so you can add that to the top of it in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So I don't really know what was going through my mind." Jagger told Rolling Stone that one of the very first songs he ever wrote was As Tears Go By, a song famously performed by Marianne Faithfull, which the band have no intentions of ever recording themselves. Of course, Satisfaction was their biggest hit. Jagger wrote Satisfaction while sitting beside a pool in Tampa, Florida, and has since told Rolling Stone that most of his best writing is done while he's touring. He explained, "It's the best place to write because you're just totally into it. You get back from a show, have something to eat, get a few beers, and just go to your room and write. I used to write about 12 songs in 2 weeks on tour. It gives you lots of ideas."
Welcome to Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, where you'll experience the complete rock and roll lifestyle without the lawsuits and STDs.
There are the Rolling Stones, and then there's Rolling Stone magazine. Obviously, you'd expect there to be a relationship between the two, but might not expect it to be quite as tense as it is. According to Joe Hagan's biography of Jan Wenner, the magazine's founder, Jagger was outraged when he first heard of the magazine. Not only was it a surprise that it had been named after the group, but the original Rolling Stones weren't even given the honor of appearing on the mag's first cover. Hagan writes that the offense kicked off a feud that lasted for the next 5 decades. The band took action, too, hitting Wenner and Rolling Stone with a cease and desist letter instead of the exclusive interview Wenner had promised new readers. Tensions continued to run high for years afterwards, even after Jagger and Winner met and the Stones finally appeared on the cover. Bizarrely, at one point, Jagger and Winner actually teamed to launch a British-based Rolling Stone, which ended up full of politics and misspellings, written by an unruly, drug-fueled staff. Winner was outraged, but by the time he got the magazine under control, Jagger had gotten bored with the whole thing and headed off to Australia to appear in an art house movie. In their 1969 obituary for Stones ex-guitarist Brian Jones, Rolling Stone magazine called him an embodiment of the music itself. It was an apt description for a deeply talented musician. Jones died at the bottom of a swimming pool after years of drug abuse and scandals, having become widely known as the band's notorious wild child. When Jagger spoke with Rolling Stone almost 3 decades later, he opened up about the legendary falling out between Jones and the band. Jagger said that recording the song No Expectations was the last time Jones was, quote, totally involved in something that was really worth doing. The falling out happened gradually, but eventually left Jagger and the band feeling they had no choice but to fire him, particularly when it got to the point where Jones couldn't even hold his guitar. Drug addiction wasn't well understood at the time, however, and Jagger has admitted to feeling a little guilty over how the issue was handled. Jagger said, "In some ways, we picked on him, but unfortunately, he made himself a target for it. He was very, very jealous, very difficult, very manipulative, and if you do that in this kind of a group of people, you get back as good as you give, to be honest."
It's widely known that Mick Jagger is something of a ladies' man, but as the Irish Independent tells us, pretty much every report of his lechery is an understatement. From broom closet affairs with Brigitte Bardot to opulent backstage parties, the singer's life has been a constant conveyor belt of women. It's estimated that he has slept with over 4,000 women. Jagger's female therapist, who he ended up having an affair with, had this to say about the singer, quote, "Being with all these different people makes him feel young and gives him all this energy. He can't stay faithful. He has to get that satisfaction from bedding a lot of women at the same time." Unfortunately for Jagger, this attitude has bled into other walks of his personal life and caused irreparable damage. His long relationship with model Jerry Hall ultimately ended in her filing for divorce after Jagger tore down the final barriers of her trust by getting a Brazilian model pregnant. According to the Journal, Jagger's response was to argue that he and Hall were never actually married because their 1990 wedding ceremony in Bali was never legally valid, and they hadn't registered the marriage afterwards. The court later voided the marriage. Jagger moved on to other romantic relationships and continued to live like a true rock star. These days, the Rolling Stones might seem like a group of forever touring elder statesmen of rock and roll, but back in the day, they were one of the most dangerous bands out there, to the point that even a casual Mick Jagger interview could contain quotes that would destroy almost any other band's career. One of Jagger's most infamous interviews happened in 1978, while he was promoting the band's newest release, Some Girls. When the 35-year-old singer sat down to discuss the album with the Today Show, Jagger was asked how he felt about the album being criticized as sexist and possibly racist. Jagger's tongue-in-cheek response raised a few eyebrows in '78, but today, it would probably require a full apology tour.
The next one's going to be more racist and more sexist, and it's going to be a whole bunch better.
Of course, guitarist Keith Richards wasn't going to let Jagger be the only one making inflammatory statements. Richards said that the album was called Some Girls because the band simply couldn't remember all the women's names. Few events in the history of popular music cast a darker shadow than the Rolling Stones' tragic freak concert at Altamont Speedway in California. As the Telegraph tells us, Altamont was a joyless event that was far from the intended Woodstock-style experience, and the vibe among the audience was hostile. Mick Jagger was punched in the face as soon as the band's helicopters landed. What's more, the Hells Angels, who were acting as a security force at the concert, were an imposing presence. Audience members and musicians witnessed the motorcycle gang become extremely violent many times throughout the day. By the time the Rolling Stones took the stage, some people were having very bad drug-related experiences, and the Hells Angels were readily handing out beatings. Ultimately, the violence escalated to the point where one audience member pulled out a gun. The Hells Angels stabbed him to death as the band, unaware of the situation's magnitude, continued the show. By the time the Rolling Stones escaped the venue in a helicopter, 4 audience members had died. Many critics agree that the disastrous Altamont concert marked the end of the free love 1960s. According to the Telegraph, the tragic events of the Altamont concert made Jagger decide against using the services of the Hells Angels ever again. Some members of the gang felt as if they were getting the cold shoulder treatment from the singer, so they made a decision to kill him. Their plan was to attack the singer's holiday residence in Long Island, New York from the sea so they could avoid the security at the front of the building and sneak in through the beachfront garden. Luckily for Jagger, the plan was foiled by an unexpected storm, which threw all the Hells Angels overboard. Though they all survived, it appears the experience was enough to deter the bikers from their Jagger-killing ways. Strangely, Jagger himself was apparently never informed about his would-be killers. The ocean-based plan of attack only came to light in 2008 when an FBI agent revealed it for a British TV series. Still, if the leather-clad invaders did make landfall, we'd like to think that Jagger would have been ready for them.
Okay, let's do it.
Mick Jagger might have had his share of trysts and flings, but even he had his hands full with singer Marianne Faithfull. As the Express tells us, Faithfull dated no less than 3 Rolling Stones members, along with other music luminaries such as David Bowie. The 4 years she spent with Jagger were turbulent, drug-fueled, and scandalous. Oh, and she cheated on him with Keith Richards, who was irked by the fact that Jagger had slept with his girlfriend, Anita Pallenberg.
Well, you know, staying in time's not everything.
According to Ultimate Classic Rock, many members of the Rolling Stones have been arrested at one time or another, and Mick Jagger was no exception. In fact, he and partner in crime Keith Richards were the first band members to have troubles with the law when the police raided a drug-fueled party at Richards' home in 1967 and arrested the pair. Jagger was originally sentenced to 3 months in prison. Richards got a full year, but an appeal managed to dismiss the sentences. In 1968, Jagger was arrested at another drug bust, this time with girlfriend Marianne Faithfull. In 1972, Jagger and Richards were arrested in Boston after an altercation with a photographer. This time, the mayor of Boston himself bailed them out so they could make it to a scheduled concert in time. In an interview with the Irish Independent, Jagger describes the 1967 arrest, trial, and the brief stint he actually spent in jail as an unpleasant, kind of nasty experience, especially because the press mercilessly covered the case, which became a notorious clash between the powers that be and the youth culture of the swinging 60s. In 2007, Mick Jagger's father, Joe, passed away. The Telegraph wrote that the rock star and his dad, a physical education expert, had a lot more in common than you'd initially assume, and Jagger indeed credits his father as his biggest influence. Joe encouraged his son's interest in singing and loaned him money to buy the equipment for his first band. In fact, Jagger's father is also responsible for his most famous aspects as a performer, his tireless athletic performance style, thanks to the workout regimen Joe taught him at an early age. Joe Jagger even gave young Mick his first appearance on television when the two were featured on an episode of the BBC's Seeing Sport together, demonstrating rock climbing and camping skills. Jagger learned of his father's death just hours before a Rolling Stones concert. Nevertheless, the shocked singer took to the stage, allegedly saying that his father would have wanted that. Mick Jagger has been reliably rocking the world since the mid-1960s, so it makes sense for his age to start showing in some ways. Even so, it was shocking when the NME reported in early 2019 that the Rolling Stones had to postpone tour dates because of the singer's illness. Fortunately, this delay turned out to be a temporary one. Jagger, who was 75 years old at the time, was extremely apologetic about letting mere health issues stop him and promised to get back on the road as soon as possible. This is actually pretty amazing, considering that the singer eventually revealed what had been ailing him, a minor inconvenience called heart valve replacement surgery. Being Mick Jagger, he recovered very quickly and was on his feet after only a few weeks. Even more impressive, 6 weeks after the surgery, he posted a video of himself on Instagram dancing in a studio and preparing to get back out on the road. It wasn't much longer before he hit the stage for his comeback show in Chicago. Imagine being an incredibly talented and successful person who has no shortage of achievements. Unfortunately, your significant other is one of the most famous people in the world. So no matter what you do, you're doomed by history to be a footnote. For Loren Scott, an extraordinary stylist and fashion designer, this scenario played out in a particularly tragic manner. As The Guardian tells us, Scott was a wealthy, successful, and popular fashion designer in her own right, but she also happened to be in a relationship with Mick Jagger. Unfortunately, her luxurious lifestyle and happy facade evidently hid an internal turmoil, and in 2014, she took her own life. Jagger was on the road with the Rolling Stones at the time and stated that he was struggling to understand how my lover and best friend could end her life in this tragic way.
Jagger was good friends with fellow rock god David Bowie, even outside of their professional collaborations. As Jagger wrote in Rolling Stone in 2016 following Bowie's passing, "We used to hang out in London a lot in the early days of the 70s. We were at a lot of parties together. We were very close in the 80s in New York. We'd hang out a lot and go out to dance clubs. Jagger and Bowie were so close that there have been rumors that their friendship was more than purely platonic. In May 1990, Bowie's ex-wife Angela appeared on Joan Rivers' talk show alongside Howard Stern. Seemingly egged on to reveal some lewd gossip, Angela declared that she had found her husband in bed with men on several occasions.
One of the best times I caught him in bed was with Mick Jagger.
You did that?
I came back from a trip.
Both Jagger and Bowie brushed off this allegation as false, and Angela also ultimately backtracked. Only a week later, she appeared on Geraldo Rivera's talk show, where she confessed that she hadn't caught them in the act of making love. They were in bed together, but nothing more. It was a hoax that fooled an entire generation. In the late 60s, rumors started flying that a supergroup met up in Canada to record a bootleg album. The band supposedly featured the likes of Mick Jagger, Bob Dylan, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. October 1969, Rolling Stone critic Greil Marcus wrote a joke review of an album that didn't exist called Masked Marauders, which included the line, "It can truly be said that this album is more than a way of life. It is life." Sure enough, readers immediately began calling the magazine's offices, demanding to know when the record was set to come out. Realizing that the gag had gone too far, Marcus enlisted the help of some Berkeley, California musicians to record an actual album. Remarkably, the band nailed the voices of the famous musicians, and the tape even received local radio airplay. It was eventually bought by Warner Brothers and released as an album. So this one isn't a total lie, but it's far from being true in the way that it was originally advertised. When anybody mentions the Rolling Stones, the first two names that come to mind are, of course, Mick Jagger and lead guitarist Keith Richards. The two have had perhaps the longest-running partnership in modern musical history. While they're responsible for writing timeless hits like Satisfaction together, there was actually another ringleader in the band's early days, side guitarist and jack of all trades, Brian Jones. In a 2019 interview with Yahoo, Bill Wyman, the Stones' original bassist, revealed that Jones led the band until his death in 1969. As he put it, "Everybody thinks that it was Mick and Keith's band, but it was Brian's band. He chose the music. He chose the name. He was the leader. He signed all the recording contracts, the management contracts, all kinds of things." And in fact, Jagger himself is quick to give credit where credit is due. In 1995, he told Rolling Stone, "Jones had a huge contribution in the early days. He was very obsessed with it, which you always need. He was obsessed. Too obsessed for me. There's a certain enthusiasm, and after that it becomes obsession. You can't be jealous and be a leader. He was obsessed with the idea of being the leader of the band." In a 2003 BBC interview, Jagger recalled Jones's uncomfortable relationship with being famous.
Fame doesn't sit very comfortably on anyone's shoulders. I don't think it suited him.
Jagger has reached such mythical status as a rock icon that entire generations don't know of a world in which he doesn't exist. As Rich Cohen put it in Vanity Fair, "Mick is Elvis in a gold lame jacket. Mick is Michael Jackson moonwalking across time. One in a million. A freak of nature." With all that being said, has Jagger always been a rebel? As it turns out, not quite. As Philip Norman wrote in his biography of Jagger, that while the singer was still just a schoolboy, he was actually quite tame. He wasn't rebellious at all, but was instead quite pleasant, as well as self-conscious and shy among strangers.
I'm too scared.
Jagger himself echoed a similar sentiment while speaking to Rolling Stone in 1995, as he noted that only after he turned 18 and started playing clubs did he start to get female attention. As he put it, "You're going, well, this is good, this is something else. At that age, you're just so impressed, especially if you've been rather shy before." In an alternate universe, would Jagger have still ended up a famous celebrity? His answer may surprise you. In 2013, he told BBC Radio 4's Today, "A school teacher would have been very gratifying, I'm sure. There are millions of things you would have loved to have done. A politician, a journalist. I thought of being a journalist once. It is a slightly intellectually undemanding thing to do, being a rock singer, but, you make the best of it." In 1973, the Rolling Stones released the acoustic rock song Angie off the album Goat's Head Soup. Ever since its release, fans have wondered who the enigmatic Angie in question is, with many concluding that it's actually about David Bowie's ex-wife Angela. According to Stereogum, rumor has it that after Angela caught her husband and Jagger in bed together, the Stones wrote her a song so as to bribe her to not say a word about it. Although this scuttlebutt may have made for a fantastic story, it's most likely not authentic. Keith Richards wrote about the making of Angie in his memoir Life, explaining that the song was mostly written by him, not Jagger. It was during a time when he was in a rehab clinic, sitting in bed with his guitar. As he explained, "I just went, Angie, Angie. It was not about any particular person. It was a name like, oh, Diana." Coincidentally, Richards had a daughter named Angela, and she was born around the same time that he was at the treatment center. There are some other rumors about Angie out there, but the fact of the matter is that it most likely has nothing to do with any salacious secret. If you believe everything you've ever heard about Mick Jagger, like how he slept with an estimated 4,000 women, then you surely think of him as the quintessential rock star. And even if you don't know what's gone on behind the scenes, his stage presence should still be enough to convince you, while he undoubtedly deserves his status as an effortlessly cool singer. Some fans might be surprised to learn that he can actually be quite pensive as well. A 1995 interview with Rolling Stone noted Jagger's, quote, natural reserve. Furthermore, he noted that he wasn't even entirely committed to playing in the Stones when they were first taking off, as he was studying at the London School of Economics. As he recalled, Keith Richards and Brian Jones didn't have anything else to do, so they wanted to rehearse all the time. "I like to rehearse once a week and do a show Saturday." Despite Jagger's reservations, it looks like being on stage pushed him out of his shell. As he told Rolling Stone, "I used to do mad things, I used to go and do these shows and go on my knees and roll on the ground when I was 15, 16 years old. And my parents were extremely disapproving of it all because it was just not done. This was for very low-class people, remember? Rock and roll singers weren't educated people." He added, "I didn't have any inhibitions. I saw Elvis and Gene Vincent and I thought, well, I can do this." There's no denying that there was a dizzying amount of self-indulgent partying to be had while the Rolling Stones were at the peak of their success. But Jagger has made sure to make time for a quieter pastime in between all his trysts, as he loves to crack open a good book. As he revealed in an early TV interview, one of the best distractions is reading, which I think is better than TV, because we really need to get away from the century. This wasn't the only time Jagger chatted about this particular hobby. In 1995, he told Rolling Stone that he's a fan of Russian writer Alexander Pushkin, as he praised his use of personal experiences embellished with imagination. Jagger's former girlfriend, Marianne Faithfull, was also a big influence on his love of literature, especially around the time the Rolling Stones' 1968 album Beggar's Banquet was being recorded. He recalled to Rolling Stone, "I was just writing a lot, reading a lot. I was educating myself. I was reading a lot of poetry. I was reading a lot of philosophy." In fact, it's thanks to Faithfull that Jagger read the 1967 Russian novel The Master and Margarita, which sparked his imagination and inspired him to write the Stones' classic Sympathy for the Devil.
In their 6 decades as Rolling Stones, Keith Richards and Mick Jagger have come a long way together, and at times have drifted a long way apart. Here's everything you need to know about Mick Jagger and Keith Richards' turbulent relationship. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards have known each other for 7 decades. They grew up together in Dartford, a town in the county of Kent, England, and both attended Wentworth Primary School. Jagger told Rolling Stone magazine, "I can't remember when I didn't know him. We lived one street away, his mother knew my mother, and we were at primary school together from ages 7 to 11. We used to play together, and we weren't the closest friends, but we were friends." Even beyond their primary school days, Jagger and Richards continued to orbit each other as kids. Jagger said, "We went to different schools when we were 11, but he went to a school which was really near where I used to live, but I always knew where he lived because my mother would never lose contact with anybody, and she knew where they'd moved. I used to see him coming home from his school, which was less than a mile away from where I lived." One fateful day in October 1961, Jagger and Richards ran into each other at the train station. Jagger told Rolling Stone it was a fateful moment. "I had these rhythm and blues records, which were very prized possessions because they weren't available in England then." And he said, "Oh yeah, these are really interesting." That kinda did it. That's how it started, really. Richards actually wrote a letter to his aunt at the time telling her about their encounter. He wrote that they bonded over their love of Chuck Berry, saying, "I was holding one of Chuck's records when a guy I knew at primary school, 7 to 11 years, came up to me. He's got every record Chuck Berry ever made, and all his mates have too. They're all rhythm and blues fans, real R&B I mean." From there, the pair kept in contact, often meeting to listen to records. Richards began picking up his guitar and playing it for Jagger, who would sing. That led to collaborations, initially playing music as a pair, and later with two others in a band called Little Boy Blue and the Blue Boys in clubs around London. On July 12, 1962, the Rolling Stones, named after a Muddy Waters song, made their official debut. The lineup included Jagger and Richards, along with guitarist Brian Jones, keyboardist Ian Stewart, and drummer Mick Avery, who later joined the Kinks. Richards wrote in a letter to his aunt, "Mick is the greatest R&B singer this side of the Atlantic, and I don't mean maybe. We practice 2 or 3 nights a week, swingin'." After a quarter century together, the Rolling Stones went through a phase that Keith Richards has called World War III, following the release of their 1986 album Dirty Work. Mick Jagger had released a solo album, 1985's She's the Boss, and was set to release another 1987's Primitive Cool. Richards, meanwhile, wanted to go on tour to support Dirty Work. The fight nearly broke up the band for good. Richards later said, "I really believed Mick wouldn't dare tour without the Stones. It was too hard a slap in the face to deliver us. It was a death sentence." For his part, Jagger told Rolling Stone at the time that he hoped the band would get back together. "We've had a lot of ups and downs in the Rolling Stones, and this is one of them. I, for one, hope we will regroup." He went on to say that he simply needed some personal and creative space. "I love the Rolling Stones. I think it's wonderful. I think it's done a lot of wonderful things for music. But it cannot be, at my age and after spending all these years, the only thing in my life. And if I want to step outside of it in any way I want, I feel I have the right to do so." With Jagger off doing his solo albums, Richards decided he might as well spend the free time doing his own solo work as well, which resulted in his 1988 album, Talk Is Cheap. He later told The Sun that the experience gave him a new understanding of Jagger, saying, "It was my first time fronting the whole thing. Usually this is Mick's job, and suddenly I understood a lot more about the dynamics of being a frontman. I understood the pressure. My feelings towards Mick became, yeah, I get it, man." Still, Richards also used the album to vent via a good old-fashioned diss track. Titled You Don't Move Me Anymore, the lyrics about Jagger say in part, "Why do you think you got no friends? You drove them around the bend. What makes you so greedy? What makes you so seedy?" Richards explained to the New York Times that yes, indeed, he was writing about Jagger, although not exclusively. "I'd written 40 songs for the album and had run out of ideas, and Steve Jordan said, when in doubt, write about Mick. But the song is not just about him. It can be about any friend you think is messing up." Richards also explained that he looked at it as a kind of musical intervention that only Jagger's closest friends could deliver. "I think of our differences as a family squabble. If I shout and scream at him, it's because no one else has the guts to do it, or else they're paid not to do it. At the same time, I'd hope Mick realizes that I'm a friend who is just trying to bring him into line and do what needs to be done." It apparently worked, because the Rolling Stones were back, both in the studio and on the road, by 1989 when they released Steel Wheels. Still, the dynamic between Jagger and Richards was permanently altered. Richards later said that a reunion was inevitable despite the new animosity. "Mick and I were joined at the hip. There was no way we could survive alone." Keith Richards published his explosive memoir, Life, in 2010. The book, which became a bestseller, did not reflect kindly on Mick Jagger, as Richards used the book as a way to air all his decades of pent-up grievances. Richards wrote, "It was the beginning of the 80s when Mick started to become unbearable. Mick got very big ideas. All lead singers do. It's a known affliction called LVS, lead vocalist syndrome." Richards added that Jagger had a swollen head and an inflated ego, and that members of the band would call him Brenda or Her Majesty or just Madam, to ridicule his high-maintenance ways. Toward the end of life, Richards described how his relationship with Jagger had changed over the years. "I used to love to hang with Mick, but I haven't gone to his dressing room in, I don't think, 20 years. Sometimes I miss my friend. Where the hell did he go?" According to the New York Post, Jagger told music journalist Rich Cohen, author of The Sun and the Moon and the Rolling Stones, his thoughts on Richards' book. Jagger's view: "Everything Richards says should be taken with a whole shaker of salt, considering he's an unreliable narrator due to his legendary drug use." Of all the barbs Keith Richards sent Mick Jagger's way in his autobiography, Life, one hit below the belt, quite literally, as Richards made snide comments about the size of Jagger's manhood. Richards had no choice but to apologize to Jagger shortly thereafter, as the rift was deep enough that Bandmates said an apology was necessary before the band could continue together. Jagger confirmed to Rolling Stone that the apology was mandatory, saying, "Well, I think it was a good thing he got together with me and said that. I don't really want to talk about it apart from that, but I think it's good that he said it, and yes, it was a prerequisite, really." Richards, on the other hand, essentially withdrew his apology in an interview with Rolling Stone, implying that he wasn't really sorry. "We resolved it in our own way, I said I regret if I caused you any, inconvenience or pain or something. I'd say anything to get the band together, I'd lie to my mother." Mick Jagger became Sir Mick Jagger when he was knighted in 2003. His knighthood was controversial, with even Queen Elizabeth II herself reportedly declaring the partying rocker not suitable for the honor. And one of the most vocal critics of the spectacle was, unsurprisingly, Keith Richards. Richards, who basically had made a second career just trashing Jagger in the press, told Uncut magazine, "I thought it was ludicrous to take one of those gongs from the establishment when they did their very best to throw us in jail. I don't want to step out on stage with someone wearing a coronet and sporting the old ermine. I told Mick it's a paltry honor. It's not what the Stones is about, is it?" He added that the honor was never offered to him because, quote, "they knew I'd tell them where they could put it."
It was a shoddy award, Anyway, I wouldn't let that family near me with a sharp stick, let alone a sword.
For his part, Jagger told the BBC that it was just Keith being Keith.
He's not a happy person.
In 2015, 5 years after Life was published, Keith Richards told the Daily News that he stood by the claims in his book, particularly when asked about his portrayal of Mick Jagger as a snob. "I'll reinforce that. His daughter, Georgia May, was sitting around in my room and she said, 'Oh, you know what Dad's like. He's such a snob. He can come off that way even to me and the rest of the band. He comes on the plane and doesn't say, hey mate.'" Richards also referred to Jagger as a control freak, adding, "He likes to know everything that's going on. He lost himself a bit in the details." On December 8, 2016, a 73-year-old Mick Jagger welcomed a son, Devereaux Octavian Basil Jagger, with his partner Melanie Hamrick, who is 4 decades his junior. Jagger has 8 children with 5 women, as well as 6 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. In a 2018 interview with the Wall Street Journal, Keith Richards discussed Jagger's huge brood. "It's time for the snip. You can't be a father at that age. Those poor kids." The quote went viral, and Richards was once again forced to issue personal and public apologies. He wrote on Twitter, "I deeply regret the comments I made about Mick and the WSJ, which were completely out of line. I have, of course, apologized to him in person." Despite the decades that Richards has spent publicly sniping at Jagger, he says they are still friends, and these arguments are just part of their whole thing. He told The Sun, "I can praise Mick Jagger 99% of the time. Mick knows what I mean, and he'll say the same about me. Things happen between Mick and me because it's just 2 guys working together. You only hear about the odd bust-up. I love the man 99% of the time." He elaborated in an interview with the Daily News, saying of Jagger, "He's a hell of a frontman. I still love him dearly. Your friends don't have to be perfect." In fact, Richards told the Wall Street Journal that the disagreements between him and Jagger are part of what keeps their dynamic strong. "Mick and I live off of this fire between us."
From failing to jive with the king of pop to forming a love quadrangle with Carly Simon, here's what Mick Jagger's collaborators and bandmates have spilled about the iconic rock star over the years. In a 1997 interview with the German magazine Focus, Rolling Stones guitarist Ronnie Wood explained, "People often get the wrong impression of Mick. The clever businessman is just one side of Mick. The other side is the same as the rest of us, a true rocker." When dining with Mick the other night, he discussed each song of our new album with the enthusiasm of a 20-year-old guy. More recently, Wood pointed out how impressed he's been with his bandmates' health. Wood told The Sun, "He's just so fit. He sets aside 3 hours a day to exercise, and that's done him plenty of favors in later life. He's superhuman, really." Besides Keith Richards, the Rolling Stone who shared the stage with Mick Jagger the most was the late drummer Charlie Watts. Before his passing in 2021, he often expressed his fascination with the relationship between his bandmates. In the book The Rolling Stones, A Life on the Road, he explained, "There's a magic about them that people like. They always argue, but they always love each other. They know each other so well." Watts also described a key difference between Jagger and Richards by noting, "They're two totally different people. One is meticulous and detailed, and the other is a complete bohemian. But they both have a direction for themselves, and they can both see whatever it is." But Watts has also made some less than positive observations, as he once noted, "You'd imagine Mick would be the happiest guy in the world, and yet a lot of the time he isn't." Bassist Bill Wyman was a crucial element in the Rolling Stones sound for decades, but in the years since his departure in 1992, he's revealed why he doesn't regret his decision to leave. In an interview with Classic Rock magazine, he explained, "Instead of being nice and saying, 'Great 30 years, cheers mate,' Mick would say the most absurd, stupid things. With that spoilt attitude he had, he'd say things like, 'Oh well, if anybody has to play bass, I'll do it. It can't be that hard.'" Wyman was also critical of how Jagger could pretend to be someone he wasn't, as he added, "Mick and Keith weren't Londoners, though Mick always tries on his Cockney accent, which he doesn't deserve, really."
How much longer are you going to be with the Rolling Stones? How much longer are they going to be around? Are you tired of it yet?
About 20 minutes, I am.
20 more minutes and that's it?
Former Rolling Stones guitarist Mick Taylor has also had a rocky relationship with Jagger over the years. As he admitted to Mojo magazine in 1997, "We used to fight and argue all the time, and one of the things I got angry about was that Mick had promised to give me some credit for some of the songs, and he didn't. I believed I'd contributed enough. Let's put it this way, without any contribution, those songs would not have existed." On the TV special On the Road with Mick Taylor, the guitarist pointed out how his personality was perceived differently just because he shared the stage with the famous frontman. Many fans had assumed Taylor was quiet and reserved, but that wasn't the case, as he clarified. Anybody that's on the same stage with Mick Jagger is going to look a little bit shy. David Bowie and Mick Jagger were friends and collaborators for a long time, before the former's passing in 2016. Perhaps most notably, they performed a cover version of Dancing in the Street together for Live Aid in 1985. But Jagger learned the hard way that he had to be careful around Bowie when it came to their creative teamwork. The late singer-songwriter admitted that he would take ideas he liked and give them his own personal twist, and he even labeled himself a tasteful thief. Jagger wasn't exactly happy with that, with Bowie explaining to Playboy in 1976, "Mick Jagger is scared to walk into the same room as me, even thinking any new idea. He knows I'll snatch it." One of the first times that happened was when Jagger showed Bowie some artwork by Belgian artist G. Polaire that was intended for the cover of a Rolling Stones album. But before that album was released, Bowie hired Polaire to design the cover of his 1974 LP Diamond Dogs. As Bowie quipped about the incident, "Mick was silly. I mean, he should never have shown me anything new. Mick's learned now. As I've said, he will never do that again." The Who guitarist Pete Townshend has had the pleasure of working with Jagger several times since the 1960s. Two of their most significant collaborations were Townshend's appearances on a couple of Jagger's solo albums, 1985's She's the Boss and 2001's Goddess in the Doorway. But it turns out that Townshend was open to more than just collaborating musically, as he admitted in his 2013 book, Who I Am, a memoir. "Although Mick was a friend, I was concerned by the thought that our co-manager, Kit Lambert, might be collaborating with our most serious competition. I was also suspicious he was having a sexual dalliance with Mick and felt a little jealous. Mick is the only man I've ever seriously wanted to For years, guitarist Jeff Beck aspired to perform with the Rolling Stones, so he was quite happy when he got the chance to work with Jagger on his debut soul album, She's the Boss. He thoroughly enjoyed the experience, and then worked on Jagger's follow-up, 1987's Primitive Cool. But before they collaborated, they were actually already connected to each other in a weird way. As Beck revealed to Classic Rock magazine in 2021, "I used to get mistaken for him all the time in '61. I used to have girls screaming at me, and I didn't know what the f*** they were screaming about. I'd pull up along somebody in a car, and they'd go, 'Mick,' and I'd be thinking, 'Who the f*** is this Mick?' Then I realized it was this guy in the Rolling Stones called Mick Jagger." As Tina Turner tells it, she helped Mick Jagger perfect one of his signature skills. As she revealed to the Daily Mail in 2017, "Mick wanted to dance, and I was a dancer, but he never gave me the credit. He said his mother taught him how to dance. But we worked with him in the dressing room. Me and the girls, we taught him how to pony." Turner and Jagger famously performed 2 songs together at Live Aid in 1985. They also shared a controversial moment on stage, as he ripped her skirt off. He was criticized for the risque act, but it didn't seem to affect their friendship, nor was it a sign of a more intimate relationship. As Turner assured the Daily Mail, "We never slept together, and they never came on to me because I think they saw me as a role model in some kind of way."
There's a communication there that you can't touch.
When Carly Simon recorded her iconic song You're So Vain, with Mick Jagger providing backup vocals, it wasn't clear if the song was about her fiancé James Taylor, or actor Warren Beatty, or Jagger himself. Regardless of who the lyrics were about, Simon has admitted that there was a lot of sexual tension between her and Jagger while they worked together. In her memoir, Boys in the Trees, she mused, "If Mick could have his way, it would be Romeo and Juliet tragic. We couldn't have each other." The chemistry was strong enough that Jagger's new wife, Bianca, was convinced he was cheating on her, though Simon and Jagger reportedly never acted upon their mutual attraction. But Bianca was upset enough that she called Taylor the night before his wedding to Simon, though Taylor assured her that it wasn't what she thought and that he trusted his fiancée. Lenny Kravitz worked with Jagger on the latter's 2001 album, Goddess in the Doorway. During a 2014 appearance on The Howard Stern Show, Kravitz revealed, "I love him. We're good friends. We've worked together. But when you're in that moment and he's in the studio and you press record, I just sit there and go, my God, it sounds like Mick Jagger."
It's Mick Jagger just coming out of Mick Jagger, and it's pretty incredible.
Kravitz was working at his home studio in Miami on the music for God Gave Me Everything, a track on that album. Jagger then arrived to help write the lyrics. Kravitz was most impressed by the fact that after Jagger heard the music he produced, he left the room and returned with the lyrics just 45 minutes later. Mick Jagger's work with top talent in the music industry isn't all business, including his regular partnerships with Dave Stewart, formerly of the pop duo Eurythmics. As Stewart once revealed to Cinema.com, "There was a time a while back when I moved to Paris, and Mick and I became friends in Paris. We were always down the studio messing about, and we would just write songs for fun. And we've been writing songs for fun ever since, really in various places." Jagger and Stewart have teamed up for several projects over the years, such as composing the soundtrack for the 2004 film Alfie. But more significantly, in 2011, they formed the band Super Heavy, along with Josh Stone, Damian Marley, and others. The goal was to experiment and create something truly unique by fusing genres ranging from reggae to the sounds of the Indian subcontinent. The album Goddess in the Doorway included Jagger's collaboration with U2 frontman Bono and guitarist Pete Townsend on the song Joy. Afterward, Bono had nothing but kind words for Jagger. He complimented his impressive looks for a man in his 70s, as well as his business skills. As he told a German newspaper, "People despise Mick because they think he only thinks about money, but he is a businessman above all else. The fact is, he understands the business. Why? Because the Stones lost a lot of money in the beginning. I have to kneel in reverence to what he has achieved. What I like about him as a person is that he always speaks his mind openly, and he never talks much about himself. He's not a narcissistic person." After Michael Jackson wrote the song State of Shock, he reached out to Mick Jagger for what he thought could be the perfect partnership for recording the duet. Jagger was a little hesitant, but the King of Pop was ultimately able to talk him into it. It helped that the Stones' frontman was already looking to branch out on his own, so State of Shock was released in 1984. The song turned out to be a hit, reaching number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Despite that success, the experience wasn't a happy one for either artist. As journalist Christopher Anderson wrote in his book Mick, The Wildlife and Mad Genius of Jagger, Jackson reportedly asked about Jagger. How did he ever get to be a star? Likewise, Jagger thought little of the King of Pop, calling him, quote, very lightweight, like froth on a beer.